anyways, we're all excited to shoot another episode this week, and there's always things to talk about, right? There's always updates. We're kind of anticipating. It feels like once again we're at this weird time of year where it's the calm before the storm, and new administration change, new policies are going to be implemented. Bids are happening with plans. It just seems like the calm before the storm. But nonetheless, want to start off with maybe going through a couple of just maybe articles, stories, things that are happening, headlines. And Mosiah, happy to post maybe links to some of these stories if you guys want to kind of follow up and read more about some of them. But I think these are, every week I would just tell you that Mike and myself and other staff members, I would classify myself as an insurance geek and a nerd, and I love this stuff. And, I spend a lot of time on different websites and sources and threads and forums, really just trying to understand like what's happening in the space. Where is the industry going? I always want it like where it's kind of like hockey, like where is the puck going to be? That's where I want to be, right? So we're always reading stuff as a self-proclaimed insurance geek and nerd, and some of these articles are relevant. So one that I kind of wanted to start off with a little bit. Should I talk about Walgreens, or which one should we talk about first?
Whatever you want first. Yeah,
so
there's a lot
one
this
that
week.
One that I maybe will kick off with a little bit because I think it's going to be impactful is there is a lawsuit happening right now with CareFirst, Blue Cross Blue Shield. And they're suing Change Health. And obviously last year we talked about
Change Health is essentially United.
Yeah, it's a subsidiary of Optum and United Health Group. And, obviously we covered it in detail. It was a huge thing last year. You all are familiar with it because it impacted for months and months.
It's still never been the same eligibility, right. and the tool.
Yeah, it was low income, like dual eligibility lookups. It was, the mechanism for pharmacists in dispensing medications. I mean, there was a lot of functions that obviously it did. Having that system go down due to a cyber attack really, really harmed the industry. And even for us, we saw personally, a huge uptick in RFIs just because we had a challenge in knowing, is this person like a fully dual eligible? Are they a partial dual? When you ask a consumer, like, hey, how poor are you? Like, I don't know. I have a hard time paying my bills. I mean, they don't know. And so it created a lot of problems for the industry at large last year.
Well, the industry's never recovered from that, right? I mean, the accretion, in other words, apps that don't go into effect or effectuate, right, is higher now than it's ever been in the industry. Mm-hmm. And a large portion of that is because
that mechanism went.
Yeah, there's a lot of duals, and the eligibility, there's a lot of uncertainty there where eligibility is not matching up. And so some of our smarter analysts in the industry, some of our friends could probably dig into that and find out, what like the modern effectuation is versus historical. And I think a large part of that is because of that.
Yeah, it's a big part of it. Some of it's come back online, some of it hasn't. But anyways, nonetheless, everybody was impacted. You can read more about the lawsuit, but CareFirst essentially is saying, hey, we lost some of our customer data from this, things that impacted our bottom line. And at the crux of it, it was more, hey, apparently they weren't even using, multi-factor authentication to log in. They had like credentials, and it's like, hey, you have a repository of 190 million people of PHI in the system, and it's not even, like, I can't even log into stupid, ridiculous, like an app for a gym or like something like that without multi-factor authentication. Like sit there and
we personally didn't have that great of an experience with Change, right? I mean, I'd never met such an, we love United Healthcare obviously, but I'd never met such an inept organization. Remember when we were trying to set up our own account?
We signed an agreement and they could never even implement it after 3 months and 6 months. And we were hitting them up and being like, we have the signed contract and scope of work, and
never got it going. And then we got a bill for $30,000. You're like, I don't think you guys, are doing things very well.
That went on for 6 months, and hey, maybe we'll get a phone call after this episode, and either that they're going to be a bill collector and say, we owe them money, or maybe they'll want to implement stuff finally. But yeah, anyway, so it was one of those things where, I think it's important because depending on the nature of the suit, whether it gets settled, or whether, CareFirst, Blue Cross is successful, it may line up another litany of of people waiting at the door, kind of seeing how
Correct.
this one plays
I
out.
believe they were only suing for like $900,000 in damages. It wasn't a lot.
It wasn't,
but it opens the door for a precedence, right?
Correct, exactly. And so it was kind of saying, hey, we were in a real fashion harmed this amount financially. And more than anything, they were like saying, hey, we had to spend or allocate $25 million in money to our, was it pharmacies and providers who couldn't have any sort of.
They had to move money to pay their providers, basically, yeah.
Exactly, and change in their own way. I think this thing has cost them billions of dollars ultimately with this. So anyways, that's just kind of like, I guess I'd say the gift that keeps on giving, that circumstance from last year, that hack. So I think that's one to kind of keep an eye on and see what happens there. The other one is, I would just say, I was surprised to read Walgreens is going to be going private. It looks like, obviously if the deal finalizes, if it does, it would close out like Q4 this year. It really prompted me to, in fact, I owned Walgreens stock for a lot of years personally, and it pays divs. And obviously Walgreens has not been performing great in the last year or two. But I was just shocked to see a company like that who has been around since 1901, who has been around for over 120 years, saying, hey, we're not making it work. It's just not working out for us. So it prompted me to go down the rabbit hole and read all about Walgreens. And I actually found it fascinating, the roots of how they got started and founded in Chicago, how they, over time, had all these different innovations, how they were the first one. They invented the malted milkshake. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Back in the days when they had like fountains.
The old drugstore. Yep.
Yeah,
the OG drugstore.
You'd go there and sit on the stool, and you'd have like the soda fountain and, go get the milkshake. So it's just a company with, I would say, like a rich history. And, Boots with, being, I can't remember if it was a UK company or Ireland or where it was from, but another, kind of similar business model with other entities, but they obviously took the majority stake in Boots back, I think it was like 2012 or 14, something like that. But anyways, another legacy company joining up, and they've had to try to make a lot of innovations and try to evolve. They were the first ones to put in actual full site, doctor services at the pharmacy as well. Anyways,
it seems like Walgreens in the news the last couple of years, like anytime you see those viral videos of like a store getting raided, where like in urban areas where they're just like pirating the stores, it seems like it's always a Walgreens. So they had definitely been pulling back in CVS, a lot of those areas, and CVS, and now in a lot of those areas you got to go in and get it unlocked to get some eye drops. That's a pain in the butt.
$4 item. Yeah.
So it's like, and I'll just stay home and order it from Amazon and have a drone deliver it in an hour.
I think a lot of that happened. Obviously, I would suspect that a lot of that stuff for a few years did hurt their financials too. But yeah, and then you mentioned one thing I forget, jogged my memory with Walgreens, but
CVS and that, like
Dwayne Reed too. So Dwayne Reed was obviously part of Walgreens too. So they've made a lot of acquisitions over the years. They obviously have made a lot of smart moves, but the environment right now it's just really tough.
Yep.
It is hard. It's challenging in the healthcare space right now. So anyways, to all those, I guess I'm just bringing it up because it was a little shocking.
Well, there's been rumors that, CVS wanted to carve off Aetna
again after acquiring them. Yeah.
So yeah, that's just all those similar entities just looking to try to, reestablish some growth and profitability that they'd had before. So it's very across the board. There's a lot of financial pressures on all these entities.
Yeah, dude. So you look at it. This is the first time they haven't paid shareholders a div since 1932. I mean, it's just been almost 100 years since they haven't paid their shareholders a div. So that's wild.
Time to make a change then.
It's tough. So anyways, that was one I kind of wanted to bring up. And then we probably should talk about, there was another lawsuit out there too with the Council for Medicare Choice. It was a group that was representing SelectQuote and some other e-tailer brokers. They were challenging, CMS on some comp-related issues. They filed the lawsuit last year among many other litigants or other,
it was essentially the telebrokers version of the Integrity and AmeriLife lawsuits against CMS for compensation, correct?
Yeah, so it sounds like there was a summary judgment, and they were not successful with that lawsuit. So you can hunt around. We can probably post some links or sources on some of these, articles and headlines that we're talking about.
So for the big e-telebrokers, the eHealth, the GoHealth, I think you could say things are not looking good for them, my friend, as one in particular.
At the moment, yeah. We'll get into that one too. And then lastly, just like my 2 cents or my thoughts on like the MedPAC kind of meeting the other day, or the letter, they kind of were, we'll just say, I don't want to say
we're jumping around a lot on that. So give some context to MedPAC and who they are, and like what this letter, or it was like a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, well, like more of it, there was a meeting, and MedPAC, I think, like, I am not the authoritarian on MedPAC, but I think it was started in like 1997, part of like a Balanced Budget Act, and they're supposed to be an entity that consults and gives advice as far as like
to Congress,
payments, to Congress. And MedPAC, though, this is my opinion, is mostly represented with people who work with physicians and hospitals more. So those types are the people who are really with MedPAC, and they kind of wrote, I don't know, I want to say it was like a scathing letter, but basically saying brokers are the problem again. And,
Yeah, there was like a Zoom meeting where they basically blamed a lot of stuff on brokers and the chasing commissions causing issues.
Yep.
I'm surprised MedPAC's even around. I mean, obviously it was established by real legislation in 97. Otherwise, it probably would have been folded up by some of the USAID or some of these entities that you go, how are you around, and how do you spend taxpayer dollars, and for what?
Well, it may not be off the table yet. It may just be that might still be around. Who knows? I mean, if 2 years from now, if MedPAC's going to be around, I don't know. How deep is Doge going to go on cutting things? I have no idea.
Well, for me, it was just, it seems like a particular pocket, a political carve out that has a political assuasion one way or the other, like some of the members of the Senate Finance Committee who just basically have it out for brokers, right? And they want everything to be done by government, by CMS, by calling an 800 number, or the carriers themselves. And again, another small government entity that's against the broker community. Go figure.
And I'm tired of it. Like it's to the point where this has been years of it, and it's just like, I'm absolutely sick and tired of, basically all these other facets, whether it be the government or carriers or other entities saying like brokers are bad, there's the problem, and you kind of even look at all of it and go, it really isn't. I mean, when you look at the dollars and the cents that the brokers, the distribution make, it's pennies of the real ecosystem, honestly, in the big scheme of things. And again, it's more, they don't make the rules. The brokers don't make the rules. They're really just the facilitators. They're the salespeople. They're the ones trying to actually, where the rubber hits the road, they're the one, dealing with the consumer. We've all talked about how there's some bad actors out there. And but that comprises a very small percentage of the actual industry. And so it's like saying they're all bad. No, you might have a couple percentage points of bad ones, but I'm just tired of being painted with a broad stroke and brush. That's where the problem always is.
Well, and overall, because we've been talking about this for over a year now on the podcast, when you have turmoil in the industry, when you have financial pressures across the board, from the funding environment all the way down through the carriers, all the way down to the providers, and there's a lot of finger pointing that's going on, and a lot of the blame game going on. And it's really, really frustrating because I feel like a lot of times there's almost some deflection that gets happens towards the brokers, where it's like, oh, don't look at us, don't pay attention to what we're doing, or dig into what we're doing and our thing. Look at them, look at the brokers,
And I've said this too for years. Like, look, you have that MLR ratio of 85-15. I'm like, look, why is it that we can, like in Congress, just vote and raise the debt ceiling, and we can just, oh yeah, we're going to raise the debt ceiling, no problem. We did say this is what it was going to be. This is how it is. We can't pass this. Here's the debt ceiling. Nope, just kidding. We just raised it. Well, why can't we just move the MLR thing from 85-15 to 86-14? and shift it 1 percentage point then? Why is that impossible? Or you just carve out broker compensation and say that can be, part of the 85 instead of the 15. Problem solved. Like these things are not, if they really wanted to solve them, are not that hard.
Well, my opinion is, after thinking about this a lot over the last year, the vilification of the broker community and distribution with, let's put pressure on FMOs and agents for compensation, and it's always fraudulent, right? Oh, they're the ones causing all this. And the real brokers and FMOs like us that do a good job, we know we are a critical piece in the supply chain, and there's a handful of small entities that cause a lot of disruption and fraud, bad actors in the industry, right? And I almost feel like we as agents and brokers, because there's not this big affiliation, we don't have a massive lobbying group, we don't have the collective dollars of the carriers, we don't have the collective dollars of all of these provider groups and these hospital networks. We have been getting bullied, right? Like the brokers are the kid on the playground that are getting picked on because we have less collective resources to band together and defend ourselves. And I really feel like all these other entities in the ecosystem
are well represented.
They're overrepresented. They do have the billions of dollars and millions of dollars to hire lawyers and lobbyist groups, and collectively, it's ultimately like the little guy, the independent agents, FMOs like us, that have to kind of band together and have these some sort of agent affiliations or these agent PAC groups that try to band together, but we just don't have near the representation or the dollars or the influence that we need to. And so we have a lot of friends in the industry that are like, hey, NABIB does a great job of trying to do some things, and HAFA and all these other entities that try to advocate for brokers, but we collectively don't have the dollars and leverage in the community. And so it's like, yeah, we want to be involved, and we talk about stuff like this on our podcast, and this is our way that we feel like we're really, advocating for the industry and kind of,
bringing to light.
Yeah, bringing to light. And we have a chance to, in a long form, content podcast like this, explain what brokers are doing and how we are, sometimes unjustly being blamed or trying to get cut out of the ecosystem when we're just, a small essential part of the equation, right?
Yep. And it's all a vacuum. We've said it many, many times before. So pick your hard, right? Mm-hmm. Either we're in this painful point right now of the industry where we already have a solution and we have a really sophisticated distribution system already built and created that's been around for 20 years in the broker solution. And so if you were to try to wipe that away, then you're still going to somebody has to do the work, right? So then you have to fund it, again, solutions of navigators, you're raising taxes, then you're going to have to spend all this money for navigators. What's going to be the effect of it? We talk about ship counselors all the time and how, ship counselors don't carry E&O. They don't really know. Their training is hit or miss. The ship counselors don't always do a great job. The ship counselors aren't incentivized to put you on a great policy, and the ship counselor might not work there in a year, you know, and so who's going to continue to service that person, after the fact, whereas a broker is financially compensated to, for the lifetime of that member and the policy, take care of that member. A ship counselor isn't. So you talk about having skin in the game. The ship counselor doesn't have skin in the game. The broker, if you're a good one, you actually do have skin in the game. So, I mean, there's that whole thing where I go, you would just eliminate a solution that already exists and then have to fund and create another solution. And there's absolutely no guarantee. And I would tell you that I think it's going to be, not a better outcome and going to cost more money. So anyways, just kind of going back to that in general, I just think that,
but that's my take, is that we're the scapegoat, right? Like, right. A lot of times the agent and the FMOs and essentially the distribution community is the one that's being vilified and scapegoated, when it's like, we're not the ones that are causing the problem. In fact, right. We're the ones that are, by and large, probably have the least dirt on our hands as far as like bad actor, fraud, waste, and abuse in the industry. And, if you are a bad agent, you can't make it very long, right, of doing things away. And if you're a bad entity, you're going to eventually get caught. Like, I don't think, if you looked at all the fraud, waste, and abuse that goes on in the healthcare industry, the percentage of dollars that are of fraud, waste, and abuse generated by bad TPMOs and bad distribution is a drop in the bucket compared to these other big entities.
Right.
And that's why I say it almost feels like a deflection where it's like, well,
Right.
don't look into us
how
too
it
much.
is.
It's these guys, like they're the problem. You should really look over there.
Right. And the saying, it's just, the shit rolls downhill.
Yeah.
It just does. Right.
Yep.
And so it's just rolling all the way downhill. And it's just felt that way for a lot of years. And it's like, really, are we done with this yet? The scapegoating game, are we done yet? Can we actually get to solutions instead of finger pointing is more what I am alluding to. So anyways, enough on that. And the other thing that I think was a big mistake too, just pointing out to these last 4 or 5 years, I think it was a really, really big mistake to classify an FMO or an IMO as the same thing as a TPMO. Mm-hmm. I think that's bad. I think that there needs to be a really clear distinction between what a TPMO or a third-party marketing organization is and what an actual FMO as far as distribution is. When you lump them all together, it becomes really convoluted, and trying to identify who or what this organization is and what's their role in the ecosystem and how do we regulate them and what are the rules. I think that was a huge mistake.
Well, and it got worse last year because what happened was when CMS first announced that they were going to do an extra $100 and eliminate FMO overrides, then all the carriers started going, oh, well, we'll just kind of like rebrand or conflate FMOs with TPMOs to kind of like, and then we'll change the dollar equation on how we fund them. And that basically now we're kind of lumped into the same bucket,
Right.
An FMO or essentially distribution, brokerages, and agents with all these third-party marketing organizations, any sort of lead generation or third-party services, which we are not in the same classification. So it'd be nice to untangle and unwind some of that.
Yeah, since I 100% agree. Do we want to talk about the big event that, talking about the landscape and the challenging part of the industry right now? We're obviously alluding to a lot of these ongoing, changes, difficulties. For the record, I'm continuing to say this is going to be another really hard year for everybody in the space. It's going to be a hard year for carriers, for filing and creating products and being profitable. It's going to be really hard for brokers and agents where you have product disruption. It's going to be hard for consumers. It's hard for everybody right now. I do think that it's going to, I hope that this year is kind of like rock bottom, so to speak, and that we go up from here. And I think that that's the trajectory. But it's this calendar year and this coming AEP for 2026 is going to be hard. So with that kind of being said, we want to segment and really talk about this upcoming election code cliff that we want to talk about. And then, of course, in conjunction with that, people in the industry really made a big deal yesterday about, GoHealth, and they had some layoffs yesterday. And, and again, we have people that we're really friendly with actually, over at GoHealth, and, it's a small industry. It's a small space, like we, rub shoulders with, we commiserate with, we go to events with the people at SelectQuote or at eHealth or at GoHealth or whoever. These are kind of like our, kind of comrades, so to speak, that we are in this industry together. And
our peers. And to be fair, the current leadership at GoHealth is much better than the old guard. I don't have a problem saying that. None of those guys are there, but
I agree. And so anyways, so these are all people like, yes, we're all competitors. We're all in this space, but we have the shared experience. We go through a lot of the same pain points. We're trying to come up with solutions. I think, again, going back to it, most entities in the space try to be good actors for the majority. And anyways, so they yesterday went through, I think, a fairly, good-sized RIF, I think yesterday, reduction in force.
A lot of management, a lot of managers, a lot of directors, and some agents as well. So
so that was kind of some news. If you kind of saw like the activity on LinkedIn, or you probably like noticed an uptick of people, hey, I'm looking for a new role, or this is what's going on.
Well, one of the interesting things for us that a lot of people don't know, we've mentioned it before on the podcast, is in Utah, it's really, we export a couple of things, and one of which is sales teams and sales in general. And most people are surprised to learn that, GoHealth, eHealth, SelectQuote, Connection Point, basically all the call centers have some sort of physical location and big facility, if not the flagship facility here in Utah, small Lake City. And so we have a lot of, obviously, cross connections in the industry and friends that operate. And so we're hearing this early on, and the whispers and people getting let go, reaching out very, very early. But obviously it's a rough thing when anybody loses their job, right?
Yep.
In the private sector and in the public sector. And it just is a sign of the current environment that we're in, because we've talked about it a lot before. We have seen the telebrokers move from I'll call it the Joe Namath model, right? Where they caused a lot of problems. No one's denying that the old run a scammy, spammy ad nationwide,
switch
ad nauseum all day long, of some old washed up celebrity claiming some benefit that's not available in all your areas, and then generating an inbound call to a poorly trained rep and processing an enrollment, caused a lot of damage into the industry. Nobody is denying that.
Or an ACA lead where you're going to call in and get some card with all this money.
Correct. Or get your $5,600 back, or get your grocery card. Some of that stuff
that's
still
only Native American Eskimos in this day.
Yeah. Some of that stuff still goes on a little bit, but there's no doubt that, from call it the 2018 to 2023, when that kind of started getting cracked down on, caused a lot of harm to the reputation of the industry. But their new leadership on all those organizations has taken a much different approach and tried to be more service oriented, kind of change their model, change a lot of their lead gen practices.
Better quality.
But it's still hard to dig out, and it's still hard to course correct. And, let's be clear, there are always going to be, despite what, a lot of regulators or other field agents or agents want to believe, there's always going to be a lot of people that want to just call somebody up and talk to somebody about insurance over the phone and get help in the enrollment there. Maybe they don't have a local broker that they trust. They don't know how to get that resource. They just moved. They don't want to. They're disabled.
Yeah. Whatever. A whole litany of reasons.
They have physical limitations. They don't want to meet somebody in person. Whatever it is, there's always going to be.
They don't even want to clean their house to have somebody come over.
There is going to be a legitimate need for a lot of people to be able to get help with their health insurance with a phone call or a representative, and so that's not going to go away, nor should it. It should be done in a really positive way, in a good, professional, compliant, legitimate way, which is what we try to do here on all of our virtual teams.
But getting back to it, I think what you're saying is, I think they're trying to kind of change their ways and be good actors, and but
it doesn't. I don't say it's too late, but it's like the industry is going through all these other challenges while they're trying to go through that.
The table was already set, right? And so there's all these challenges to navigate. And so they went through a RIF yesterday. And so, it is hard. It's challenging. I think there's other entities out there, like we're hiring, others are hiring. There's definitely opportunities for those people to land somewhere. But I think that they're, obviously doing the things that they financially and fiscally need to in order to be profitable or be solvent moving forward. So, it was probably a necessary evil for those people who were laid off. And I will say that it's a product, or it's a byproduct of just the environment right now. We're talking about there's this election code cliff that I'm really shocked that people aren't talking about it more. I think they're trying to right size and adjust their labor or their sales force in accordance to the opportunity that's out there, right? Because we've been talking about it for 6 months and even a year, planning ahead to this, because there's really two big components to this. Is that, look, for the last how many years? When did the COVID DST FEMA disaster code come out?
2020, the first initial one, yeah.
So for 4 or 5 years now, we've had really what is like an open-ended just election code.
If we're just being real, let's just call it what it is. That for all intents and purposes, it's been, if you need to move, there's been an opportunity to do it.
And let's be honest, again, we go back to the broker. Look, brokers will always go by whatever set of rules that you give them, right? That's just
the Raptors will always find a way.
Clever girl. Yeah, well, it's like they don't make the rules. Like, everybody else makes the rules. CMS makes the rules. The carriers make the rules. It's like they just abide by the rules.
Show me your comp plan. I'll show you the behavior.
Yeah, and so we've had this election code, this DST that used to be out there, and it was only based on like FEMA declared disasters. But then it got broadened, even the language, to where it included local disasters, state declared disasters. The language got broadened and the definition got broadened to where almost anything was an election code, right? And so, when there was cold weather in the South or there was a natural gas shortage, there's an election code. It's just as an example. There's a drought in Utah. That's an election code to change your Medicare plan. It's just, these are examples, but it's, again, the broker didn't do that. They're just operating by the rules that are given. They're saying, yeah, but the intention wasn't that. Well, you did a piss poor job in really defining when and how that election code was supposed to be utilized. And you also saw carriers interpreting it, some being very restrictive with it and others being completely open. So that election code has existed for 4 or 5 years, and there was the proposal.
It existed before.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's been, I don't want to call it, it's been abused or utilized like,
heavy. Yes.
And so that's why CMS wanted to ultimately crack down on it, which led us to where we're at now.
Yeah. So they put out, a memo basically 2 months ago, like in January, and said, hey, I think it was like second week in January, something like that. And they said, hey, that election code is only going to be able to be utilized if somebody calls into CMS. And so I'm going, well, that can't work because that's not in alignment right now, because the current tone is the government is cutting back, reducing headcounts. Already as it is, you call into the marketplace, it's a 20-minute wait time to talk to somebody at CMS. They're not going to be staffing in more people, so that doesn't work. So the reality is, from what we're seeing and hearing, we think that election code is just going to go away completely, that you will not be able to use a DST or a declared disaster as an ability to change somebody's Medicare Advantage plan. And so I think that if you're an organization like eHealth, a big telebroker shop, eHealth, GoHealth, any big FMO out there, you don't have that ability to use that and change somebody's plan. So that really restricts and limits your ability to sell products and do consumer plan changes throughout the year. Good, bad, otherwise, not. I don't have an opinion. I can see it cutting both ways. I am in favor of it, saying I think it's great because it's going to ultimately long-term provide a little bit more stability to the marketplace. I think it's going to reduce the number of plan changes. I think that, LTVs will increase. So I think that's a good thing. Less friction, a little bit less noise. So ultimately I'm okay with it, but there's got to be some sort of like a right size or an adjustment happening with that, election code going.
Well, my issue with it is that in legitimate cases too, disasters are obviously catastrophically impactful, right? You look at the recent fires in California, or the hurricane and the floods in Asheville, North Carolina, or the hurricanes in Florida.
Right.
And anybody that lives in those areas, sometimes their houses are destroyed, and access to care gets really difficult. They need to go to the doctor. They have to change plans. They got to change their network.
Well, as if they're like, oh, I don't have a house. Oh, but my PDP plan from Humana, my copay went up by $10. Let me go fix that right now.
Yeah, exactly. But there is a lot. So it's hard to all of a sudden just take a hardline stance and shut it off, or to shift it and go, well, somebody at CMS is going to be the decision maker, and you have some third-party contractor that CMS has hired, and some person that just got hired 6 weeks ago is going to be like, let me be the one that decides if that's a legitimate use of that election code or not. It's just so silly. But the other issue that we're up against right now is you also have the LIS and dual SEP, quarterly SEP, that went away as well simultaneously with this.
Yep.
And so you have the two most utilized SEPs during lock-in that are going away.
So setting the table to that, like we're really just conveying that throughout the year, let's say April through and until you're back into basically the annual enrollment period or the annual election period, all those months, you're writing either a person turning 65, which, let's be honest, there's not that many of them for the marketplace that exists. Those are heavily sought after. They're heavily marketed to. I mean, they are bombarded, because there is no shortage of brokers and agencies and people going after that turning 65. So you had the people turning 65, you have the other election codes like SEP moves and some of these other circumstances, loss of eligibility, kind of, things like that, moving in and out of a facility. I mean, we really could do an episode, about all these maybe not, or these lesser known election codes, but, essentially most of the election codes that were written were duals and DST from April through the end of the year, really. So with that kind of cliff we're talking about, DST's gone. And now you're also looking at the impact. How many states are there? 11 or 13 that are Heidi-Fighty?
13.
So there's only 13 out of the 50 states that are Heidi-Fighty. So
that doesn't even mean that they're a competitive plan. If they're a Heidi or Fighty, they might not even be.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have a master list like we do, like of all of the actual plans with the HICN or like the PVP that CMS deems as like a Heidi or Fighty, like a highly integrated or a fully integrated, dual plan. So we know, like us and our agents, we know, hey, these are the specific plans that we know you're going to be able to write, moving forward in April. But the general industry, that most agents don't know, they're not aware of it. And I think a lot of these organizations are saying, we're just not going to pump out the same volume of sales that we were in previous years. And that's not to say it's a bad thing. It's just going to be a reality.
Well, and that might have been, I'm sure that factored in a lot to the, the recent layoffs at GoHealth as they're going, well, we have a lot of uncertainty here. And, you and I talk all the time where we basically feel like you're always waiting for industry updates, right? Breaking news to make decisions in the business.
When's the next shoe going to drop? What's it going to be this week?
Yeah, and we have a new director of health and human services and CMS, and so far they're newly in there, and they're just wrapping their heads around like what even is going on. There hasn't even been one significant or consequential thing I can think of.
I would say there's one. That they basically put out a letter saying the way that we interpret this is that we're not going to be accepting public comment anymore. That was a big one that they put out and said, hey, there's no longer going to be this thing. Like we're going to be, Well,
the public comment was so effective last time.
Well, yeah. And
so impactful.
Exactly. But that's the one thing they were kind of just saying is, that is one thing that I will say so far. They did put out there and say, yeah, we're not doing this anymore where we're going to open this up for public comment. And the both sides of me said, okay, understandable, because at the same time, what did that really accomplish? Every time there was a public comment, it was like, that was noted, and go pound sand.
Exactly, and we don't care.
And it's gone.
So,
well, the only other thing that CMS did come out and they announced the funding increase for 2026 of only 4.3%, which if that stands, that tells me that we're going to have a real rough funding environment again this year. But, to Dan's point, there's just not a lot of updates that people can make good business decisions with. And so as a result, you got to execute on maybe saving the money or being in a good...
Yeah, you're in a business, right? So you're going, hey, you got like offense, defense, you got like your top line revenue that you're making, you have your expenses, and you have to make a profit. So you go, well, if we're not going to be selling more goods and services and more volume, then how can we be more efficient? How can we increase our margin? So I'm sure they're doing all sorts of those things where it's like, how can we sell more products to the same buyer or consumer? How can we increase our margins? How can we reduce our expenses and, kind of right size our headcount of agents to the opportunity that exists? And, every organization right now is probably going through it. I would not be surprised if there's a lot more right sizing between now and the end of OEP, or, organizations that are kind of holding on and seeing how it goes, and that people are also, there's some adjustments made in like April or May, because it's just a hard ask to carry on the balance sheet, so to speak. People who aren't producing revenues throughout for 5 or 6 months, it's pretty hard to hold them on a shelf until your next enrollment season.
Well, we're even seeing that with smaller carriers, right? We've seen carriers continue to make changes that we've never seen before this time of year, where they go, hey, we're not, paying commissions anymore on these plans too. They keep adding to that, or we're actually pulling out all together. We're not, we got Blue Cross in Idaho
or
pulling
your
out.
Elevance saying we're not going to pay a commission on all chronic plans nationwide because, what can you sell in lock-in? Chronic plans, because there's an election code. That's cool. You can sell them, but we're not paying a commission. So, I mean, you're still seeing a lot of these things happening.
Yeah. And, strategically as a business owner, you sit and go, well, who wants the business and where?
But it's becoming a more difficult needle to thread, right? Is what we always talk about. It's like, okay, you look at, it's almost like, I think of that meme, that short guy that's like got all the strings crossed like on the board. You know what I'm talking about?
It's Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yes. Yeah. So you're gonna have to find that mosaic to put up. That's what I feel like when we're having these strategy meetings, and I'm like, FML.
You're like, and if we do this, then we make some money.
Yes. Yeah. And if I do this and I have all these strings and everything drawn out, like, this is how we make money. And it's just like, it's getting worse all the time. And so, to the point, that's what I feel is happening right now. There's like this moment in time where all these organizations and distribution are kind of going, it still looks really bad and hairy. This other 2027 and 28 moving forward, they looks probably better, but my crystal ball is hazy. We haven't really gotten the clear financials and economics from the current administration, but I do know that the next 6 to 12 months in front of me look bad. So I think people are just being cautious and trying to make decisions to right size and be able to kind of ride out the storm, I think.
Yeah. I mean, with the, new administration that's really just been essentially set up and taking effect, I think a lot of people were overly hopeful that good changes would happen, changes that they wanted or expected would happen faster than is probably realistic to expect. And there's a lot of other obvious initiatives and priorities going on right now.
Surprisingly, it's on the back burner and not as important.
Yeah, and you're like, could we fix this with Health and Human Services first before we really rename the Gulf of Mexico? I mean,
well, there's
priorities, right?
Yeah, but it's like, hey, when are you going to work your way down to here?
Yeah,
I know that's.
What about this?
Speaking of the Always Sunny in Philadelphia, I watched The Hangover this last week again because I hadn't watched it in like 4 years. It was funnier than I remember. And
the OG Hangover?
Yes, the original one.
Yeah.
With Zach Galifianakis sitting there and the math is like on the screen. I was like, oh.
Yeah, comedy pre like 2015. There was like a dead 7 years where nothing could be funny and like no good comedy.
Because it would offend everybody.
Yeah, but now
it was...
My kids go back and watch old comedies like that, and they think they're so funny. And I'm like, yeah, because it
was funny.
It's how it used to be. People used to actually like to joke.
Oh, absolutely. So I think to wrap, before we go to this last part we want to talk about, before we run up on time, look, it's going to be, there's always winners and losers, right? Hard times makes hard people. Tough times makes tough people, whatever the expression is. I don't know. You'll have to correct me. But
hard times create strong men.
There you go. It's just going to be one of those things where we're in a tough environment. There's going to be winners and losers. And look, we're bullish. Like, we like the disruption. We like the chaos. I might like lose sleep and like have my whiteboard and like my crazy initiatives and all the things. As the industry kind of goes through all these challenges, we just think that the people who are innovative, that are nimble, that are engaged, they're going to continue to find a way to, eke out profits and be able to be resilient and make it work and come up with like really innovative solutions. I really think that for those people, those brokers, those agencies, those entities, these challenging environments are good for them. So
yeah, I agree. And like we've been talking about, we're struggling a little bit finding good quality new talent, into some of our sales teams and things like that. And it's honestly in one way it's really difficult, and another way it's really good because we're seeing a culling of certain people out of the industry and a right sizing of having too many people in the ecosystem, and those who are
people who had no business being a fiduciary or an insurance advisor, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
you're like, find something else, buddy.
Yeah, go sell something else. But yeah, so I think that's really good. So the other thing that I think we wanted to talk about, just that we're seeing in general in the industry, and this has been, it's always existed, but we're seeing it happen more and more to a larger scale, is just agency. And I actually had a meeting earlier today with some of our staff members, and we were really going through, like defining what is a sub-agency, like what does a GA look like, or an MGA, or like this type of an organization or an FMO, these people that we end up like sub-distributing a contract to, like what do they look like? Let's describe what this organization should or would look like, and what are the services that they provide, and how do we classify them, and what's a good partner and what's a bad partner. And so we were actually having, a little mini staff meeting earlier today talking about this. And like I said, it's always existed, and many of you who listen understand the industry, that there's sub-distribution, right? That the carrier creates a product, they get with their actuaries, they, design this product that ultimately is for a consumer. And then after, they've built this product that should be appealing and their actuaries deem it's going to be profitable and good, they go to market and they go to us as distributors to then go to agents and agencies, sell these products and get them into the hands of consumers, right? Sounds easy in theory, but then you have this whole distribution, this whole layer of hierarchy, and we call it hierarchy hell sometimes, of all these different levels and layers and entities and people in the middle, and who's providing
What do you
value.
mean? Everybody's an FMO. Everybody's an FMO.
Sure. And it's like, well, who's actually providing the goods and services, and who's providing the value? And those are varying answers, but we talk about people who are stuck frequently in either hierarchy hell, where they're just in this chain of, well, this person I go to church with or recruited me or kind of got me, so I'm kind of like stuck under this person,
and he's under this guy over here, who's under this lady over there. And
I have like my 5 agents though, but I'm writing 1,000 apps and I should be this, but I'm only this level because Ricky Bobby got me into the business, and I kind of owe this person, so I can't therefore grow my business. And they're stuck in all these weird layers where they don't have a path to really grow their business. And so we kind of talked about 2 elements of, first of all, like that term we call hierarchy hell, and where we identify good agencies actually who are trying to grow and what's limiting or preventing or holding them back from being able to truly achieve it. And what a lot of these business owners won't ever do is just rip off the Band-Aid and say, hey, I have this glass ceiling. I really can't ever grow my business the way I want to because of this hierarchy hell and all these layers stuck. And I need to make a tough decision to just remove myself, to kind of re-roll, to align somewhere where I'm properly aligned and I can actually grow my business, because there's no barriers preventing me from doing it. Because frequently these other organizations, they're kind of the middlemen, are not actually trying to prop up and grow and support them in growing their business. They're trying to hold them down or hold them back, because if they leave, they lose that revenue, right?
Yeah. Well, overall, I think we talk about it. There's 2 different types of agencies, right? There's
I was going to go there.
A solo producer that is
so let's talk. We talk about the profile of these businesses, right?
Yep.
And you're right. You're going there where we talked about like, what do these agencies look like? And ideally, we think that there's kind of 2 profiles of an agency. One is like you have a person who is a producer, who
generally a high producer.
Yeah, yep. Generally they're really good. These are agents who were really successful producing and selling, great salespeople, and then ultimately they were like, hey, I want to make more money. I'm a highly successful person. And they go recruit some people, and we call them like a producer with some friends, right? That's what we internally call it. And they get a couple family members, they get a couple friends. They get like a GA contract or an MGA or whatever.
They really want a bigger override on most of their own personal business. And if they make a few bucks on the other people, that's just great.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like their goal was, hey, I want to make more money. Well, how do I make more money? Well, there's 2 ways to make more money, right? Either you increase your margin or you increase your volume, right? So these people just kind of take the path and say, hey, I'm a good salesperson, but my capability of selling is fixed. So how do I make more money if I'm one human? Oh, I can get some other people to sell too. And if I get a higher contract level per sale, I just increase my margin, works out great. And then I got a couple people, if they sell whatever they sell, good luck. They're at least making some money on them, right? So we look at that as that's a profile of some of our agencies that we see out there in the space. And I mean, admittedly, we know that we have some partners that are like that too, where, look, I'm not saying that there's anything good, bad, or otherwise, but like from a profile perspective, that's what it is. This is a person who has a handful of people, and really their bandwidth, their capabilities, they kind of are what they are in a lot of ways. There's not a whole lot that we can really do to help that business owner and that entity grow much larger, because a lot of times too, with that profile of an agency, they are trying to make more money, but they don't understand everything that you talk to them about investing into their business is an expense. It's not an investment, right? And so when we're talking to these types of agency owners and you're saying, hey, you need to do things like hire your admin. You need to invest into like either like a website or lead gen. You need to invest into like a brick and mortar. You need to do all these other things, because we're seeing the business from saying, hey, you need to expand your operations. You need to grow and scale it. And those things are true investments, but in their mind, that's just money out of their pocket or an expense.
Well, and most of those guys, and a lot of them will admit it, they don't want to teach, train, and develop. They don't like it. They don't want to have to take somebody around and teach them, how to do it brick by brick. They want to just kind of get what they get and, be the main producer, and they don't have a desire to do that. Or,
and that extra money is their vacation money, their boat money, their whatever.
Correct. And that's the biggest differentiator from those guys and real agency owners. And it's the difference of what you were willing to do, which so many people were not, which is roll the business, the agency revenue back into the business, and not just be like, oh, well, I made extra override, and so all that money is my extra money now that goes in my personal bank account. And that's a huge, an understated thing that most people aren't willing to do, that gets them to an actual other classification of, well, you're actually treating it like a real agency and like a business, and you are trying to grow.
Yeah. And those types of business owners understand a big picture. They have something that they're achieving. They have metrics set. They actually are segmenting out their business. They're analyzing the products that they're selling. They have intentional effort into like recruitment efforts or like a growth campaign or marketing. They have actual budget set for leads. They actually look at their spend. Like, I will tell people, I'm happy to spend dollars. I look at it like, when I spend dollars, it's like, go recruit a few friends, like you spend money and you expect those dollars to bring you back and reward you with more dollars. Right. So anytime I'm looking at investing dollars, not an expenditure or an expense.
Yep.
Right. And so I think that it's just a different mindset that a lot of those agency owners have, that are truly saying, I want to run an agency. I want to grow a business, a real business. And those are really the partners that we're looking for, right? Here at Agent Boost Marketing, not every deal is the right deal. And we talk about that a lot too. Look, we have all these agency owners that all the time, like you have a couple that you've dealt with lately that I've dealt with all the time too, that come to us and say, hey, I want to do business with you guys. Here's my contracts. And they're like really good contracts. We'll meet with them and go, Your terms are fine. You're a shop. You have a handful of agents. You write this business. It's a good shop. What are you talking about? Your contracts are fine. Well, what are you guys going to give me? Well, you already have like a really good margin. You already have good dollar
Probably
amounts.
More than you deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. You already are getting more money than you should. So like, we're not going to give you more, because look, we don't play that game where we try to, oh, well, I'll give you this. And that's not our game. We want business owners that want guidance, that want to actually grow and scale their business, that want technology, that want the support mechanisms, and they understand that, and they're on board so that we can help them grow and scale their business. I am not like the shopping clearinghouse where some of the other people in the space are, where they'll give out, let's just call it what it is, $150, $175, a $200 contract to some agency, that doesn't even have a brick and mortar, doesn't have a single admin, and is operating out of their house. And they have these high agency contracts that they have no business in having. We don't play that game. I think it's a terrible part of our industry that they should clean up.
Yeah, I kind of want to just chime in, because, for the purposes of agencies, we kind of, anytime we bring on a lot of agents all the time, and our direct agents and growing our own channels is like our bread and butter, and then the secret to our success. Right. We also have a smaller, not smaller, but that's not our focus, but the agencies division that we have are very, very good. And I think the agencies that we have under us are all growing, and maybe one or two kind of are stagnant, but in general, the agencies that end up coming with us are agencies that experience high levels of growth, and we should probably get some of these agency owners on. But what when we're out talking to all these agents and agencies all the time, those conversations always make their way to Dan or I, because we want to be the ones that, try to figure out what those agencies need and have high level negotiations with them and conversations. And it usually goes one of two ways.
Right.
And they'll come to you and they're like, I'm just not growing. I'm stuck. I'm this. I can't figure this out. I like what you guys are doing here. I want to work with you guys. I see what you're doing, blah, 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 blah. And then what happens is Dan and I will spend a lot of time, and people don't realize this, to go look through our contract levels, find out what's appropriate, but really offer a solution.
Well, we also, just so people understand, is like we have to really look at like, okay, what services are they using of ours,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like how much of our CRM are they going to use? How much consumption are they going to have that we're providing them in our CRM with all their HIPAA compliance and this? How many apps are they going to run through Sunfire, which we're paying for? What about our onboarding services? What other tools are they going to utilize? And so we're having to really think about like, okay, like on paper, if we're as an agency making $25 or $50 on a margin or an app, what services are they actually utilizing within, and who's paying their agents? Are we, are they, or what does it look like? So we're having to really kind of take a look and spend some time into what makes sense and kind of coming up with call it like a term sheet or a proposal of what we think is reasonable with an agency, right?
And we'll craft them a proposal that's a true partnership, right? And in a partnership, both entities need to be able to win, right? Both entities need to be able to make some money. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense and you're not going to grow, right?
Well, and let's be honest, too. The other part of that, too, is, and before you finish, is that there's a certain time element, right? Like I spend some of my time with agency owners and actually helping them understand certain concepts, whether it's agency owner calls every month, just ongoing phone calls, whatever it be. Same with you, a lot of time in mentorship. And you go, look, my time is valuable. So if I'm going to be spending my time, I have to make some money doing it or else I'm not going to do it, right?
Correct. Well, not only that, the margins, per rep are obviously
right.
much, much less because the agency's usually making the bulk of the revenue, right? And at some point in the conversation, that usually is always, well, it's not about the money, right? It's about this. But every damn time, almost, it always is about the money.
It's all about the Benjamins, baby.
Yep.
Right? And I would say that we end up bringing on about a third of all of the agencies that we talk to, that kick the tires, that are interested in joining Agent Boost, because ultimately it will always come down to the money. And you'll go, here's this personally crafted solution for your agency. This is how we're going to help you grow.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like we'll get on a plane, we'll fly out there with you, we'll
Yep.
help you co-recruit, we'll do whatever. I mean, it's
and you'll get access to myself and Dan, and we'll help you
the training video libraries,
grow the business. We'll do everything for you. And then almost inevitably it comes back to, oh, well, it turns out that I took your proposal and, they don't necessarily say this, but what ends up happening is they take whatever we give them and go leverage it to whoever they're currently doing with, and they shake them down for a couple extra bucks, and they squeeze every dollar they can out of that equation to where they think that's what they want and that's what they need.
right.
And they end up either, not working with us, or they think that solves their problem, right? Almost, I can't think of one entity that didn't end up working with us where I go, oh man, we really missed the boat on those guys, because look what they've done. And I'm only bringing that up not because
I have one that I have regrets that I miss.
I'll have to talk
Ever.
about that. Well, and there's, you look at it and you go, is that really what you need? And it's not that we don't have good levels, right? It's not that we're not offering people competitive, commensurate things out there in the industry, but what we have is the knowledge and the skill set to help you grow. And if that's what you want as an agency and an agency owner, is you want to earn it, you want to grow. And it's not always just about squeezing out every extra dollar out of the equation.
Yep.
Then that's how a partnership works. And those are the agencies that we are bringing on, and they're having a lot of growth. And then all of a sudden, it's this mutually advantageous relationship where they're growing and we're continuing to grow and they're happy. And I can't think of, a good agency that we've cared to lose in years and years and years, and it just makes it, my point is, it's not always about the money, right? Sometimes you need the path, the mentorship, the tools.
How often do you hear, I'm not getting the support that I need?
Yes.
Define support. Okay, I just want more money.
Yes.
You know?
And it's like, okay, cool. Go shake down somebody else who just whores their contract out, all across the industry.
Yeah.
But then what happens is you already are asking this entity for all this extra money, and then you go ask them for all these other things that you need, tools, training, support, mentorship, and they're like, bro, you're already getting all the money. You're already making everything. You've squeezed everything out of this relationship, and there's nothing left to give.
And then at the end of it, the agent loses because then they want support, and they're like, hey, who helps me? Well, they go to the top of the house, the FMO, so to speak, and they're like, dude, go talk to this agency because they're getting 90% of all the dollars, and then that person's not providing them the resources that they need.
Correct.
Sadly.
And then that further plays into hierarchy hell that Dan talked about, where you got this guy who's under this guy, who's under this guy, who's under this person, and they're all making their, they've all got their hand in the pie, and yet nobody's the one offering the help, the teach.
And then the Spider-Man meme,
Yep.
the agent's going like, well, go talk to this GA or this MGA or this or whoever. And then the agent's caught in the middle just saying, I just want to write some damn business and make some money. Who's going to help me? You know?
And so if you're an agency owner or you want to grow an agency and you're out there in that position, it is a little bit of a pain in the butt to move to a new entity. And Dan has done this many, many times throughout his career to be able to position the business to where it's at now. We've done it many times recently where you have to make changes that are sometimes a little bit painful. But if you are never willing to go through a little bit of a rub, a little bit of friction to get to the other side, then you're just going to stagnate and you're just going to be in the exact same situation that you've always been in, and you're never going to be able to break through.
Yeah. And I think just to kind of bring it home to the reason that we wanted to kind of talk about this today is we're talking about how hard the industry is, right? And we're looking ahead and going, look, and it's not to always just toot our own horn, but we're doing great as far as the business goes and growing. And we do see the challenges ahead, and we're trying to position our agents and our agencies and give them the guidance that they need to be successful, right? And so as we see these challenges, we're just like everything. People become more desperate as things get harder and more difficult. Then people are figuring out, like, I'm having a harder time growing. I'm having a harder time writing business. And in their mind, their solution is, I just need to make more money. Well, how do I make more money? I need to go get more money out of my upline. I need to go get a new upline that gives me more money. That's not always the solution. And we're just seeing a lot of these agencies becoming more, I don't want to use
transactional,
desperate. I don't want to say desperate, but they're like really grasping for like some solution to where they can somehow make more money because things are getting difficult. And I guess because we have more people kicking the tires these days, look, I'm all for it. We want partners. We really do. But we want to try to help people understand, like, we want to give people, agency owners, real solutions, real partnership, and an actual way to grow their business that makes sense, so where they will make more revenue, solve these issues. But giving you $25 more on your contract is just not the solution to the ends all be all to your problems.
Well, and the interesting thing for me is I recently had an agency owner that I was talking to, and he was like, yeah, I'd really like to have some developmental calls with you and your brother Dan, and that's like what I really perceive would be valuable. And when it came down to it, it was like, oh, he ended up going with where he made $25 more or whatever. And I go, so the extra couple $1,000s more that you think you're going to make per year was not worth, the mentorship that I know you would have got from Dan, from my brother, which is worth exponentially more money than that. You know what I mean? The teaching, the training, the ecosystem, the environment, being with a collaborative effort of winners. And one of the things that I think is cool about our agencies too is most of our agencies are very friendly. I think all of them, they're very collaborative. They work together. They learn from each other. They are, it's almost like, I view it like a sports league, where they all have their own teams and they get along well. That's maybe not a perfect analogy because there's a lot of rivals and stuff, but our agency owners are very friendly, and there's very much a collaborative effort there, not necessarily a competitive.
And you'll find that maybe people right in the backyard, if you have an agency owners in the same valley, they may not share like trade secrets with one another, but it's not that they don't feel like they can't trade secrets with an agency that's 12 states away, and there's a lot of those best practices that they share with each other. And then, of course, a lot of our events that their agents come to, or even events that they come to, where, you rub shoulders with other agency owners and you kind of figure out like, hey, I'm going through this growth problem or this scale problem, and how are you, solving this? And there's commiserating that happens there because, chances are whatever problems you're trying to figure out as an agency owner, somebody else is in the same boat, or they've already solved it, or we've already solved it, and we already know how to do that. And so there's just a lot of that I think they appreciate.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. So I guess the message is, if you're a small, a large agency, small agency looking to start one, we'd love to be your partner. But it's not always, just don't, and whether you work with us or not, right? Just don't always look at it from who's going to give me the most dollars? Because that's just a part or a portion of the overall equation that you need to be successful.
Yep. And I would just, last things, just make sure a couple things to all those people out there who are trying to grow. Make sure you're aligned in a place that is going to actually allow you to move up multiple levels, and you have structure in order to do that. I think that's really important. Make sure that if you have an agreement for a release, or if this happens, then Y, if X, then Y, make sure that you have it in writing, and I would just those are just cautionary tales and things that I would share out there.
That was just like the conversation out with that new agent. And I said, lesson 1 in the industry.
Yeah.
Know who you are under and who you're getting entangled with from now to whether it's me or us. That's your first thing. Cause he was like, I'm under this guy. I don't know who he's under. And it's crazy to me that people get locked up under these hierarchies
very convoluted.
And
structure.
they have no idea that they're multi-layers deep now, and they've encumbered their contract and made it difficult for themselves for a long time.
Or I'm direct with them. Sure you are.
Yeah. You're like, nope,
No,
you
you're
are not.
So anyways, just some friendly advice out there to listeners. But anyways, I think I'm good. Do you have anything else you want to cover?
No.
With agencies?
Went
a
little long, yeah.
It was just relevant just because, again, difficult time of year, difficult time of the industry. We're just seeing an uptick in that.
Something on our mind, a lot of conversations we're having, yeah.
Yeah, and so again, trying to look for, whether it's us or somebody else, look for a partner that's actually going to be a solution to your problem. A couple extra bucks one time or a couple bucks per deal, that's not going to be the solution that you need most of the time. So anyways.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.